Hey, chiropractors, welcome to Modern Chiropractic Mastery with your host, Dr. Kevin Christie, where we discuss the latest in marketing, business, and professional growth with some of the leading experts in the industry. Welcome to another episode of Modern Chiropractic Mastery. Today I've got Michael Silverman. He is a local attorney, and as you listen to us really dive into some of the details of considering an integrated practice, realize there's different levels of having an integrated practice, and it can be small, medium, and large in the way in the scope you want to do things and the different types of providers. And we're going to dive into some of that and some of the best practices. And obviously, um, you know, you always want to have your own legal team when you're going to do something like this, but we wanted to dive into some of the things that you really got to start thinking about if you want to do this currently or into the future. You will notice that Michael, like myself, is in Florida, and so we talk about Florida a fair amount, but a lot of it is applicable to your state, or it'll give you the understanding of what you need to look at and see. Okay, yeah, my state differs here, right? And so you're going to be able to, transfer what we talk about sometimes here in the state of Florida to other states, or give you the idea on what to think about. And Michael and his team work directly with our state association a lot at conferences. That's how I first met his partner speaking, and they really have a wealth of knowledge in this field. And you're going to get a lot of great insights into this very it's a trend we're seeing in the profession, and I think in the positive, it's a great opportunity for many chiropractors. Okay? Before we dive into that episode, just want to check out our coaching program. Go to modernchiropracticmarketing.com. You can attach our team to yours. Our signature program is coaching, and it's also marketing done for you. And so we attach our team. You get a coach, you get a marketing coordinator, you get other ancillary advisors around you to help grow your practice and make 2025 a great year for that. So go to check out our coaching programs at modernchiropracticmarketing.com and stop feeling like you're left on an island and really help grow your practice with you. We have over 50 clinics throughout the United States and UK under our program there. That's not including our mastermind clinics. And so and that's not including our Chiropractic Success Academy. We're getting a lot of great results. We're changing practices. We're doing it ethically. And so maybe it's time to start investing in your future. So check us out at modernchiropracticmarketing.com. All right. Without further ado, here is my interview with Michael Silverman. All right. Excited to have Michael Silverman on the podcast here. It's an attorney out of Florida. I'm going to let him dive into some more of the specifics of that, but we're going to have an interesting topic on compliance around integrated clinics and even some things about W-2 versus ICs and just some of the legal matters that we need to consider. We're seeing a lot of chiropractic practices integrate in one form or fashion, and I thought this was a timely discussion around this. But before we dive into it, Michael, tell us a little bit about yourself personally and professionally.
First and foremost, Dr. Christie, thank you for having me here. It's my pleasure to come before you and your audience and have a chat on medically integrated chiropractic practices. A little bit about myself, my background. I'm personally born and raised in a chiropractic household. So I
Mhm.
got to, I got to grow up in that environment and really see my father, back in the early 90s, make such a long lasting impression upon his patients. He had one of the first medically integrated chiropractic practices down here in South Florida in the early 80s. And, it was really just a matter of not being smart enough in my chemistries in order to follow in his footsteps to be a chiropractor. So my next best bet was to become an attorney who specialized in working with healthcare professionals and medical business owners. My office is down here in South Florida. That's a law firm of Silverman Bain, and just given the background and the environment that I grew up with, a large part of my practice is involved with working with chiropractic physicians in both standalone practices and medically integrated practices. And speaking of the latter, it's coming to be like Starbucks on every corner down here in South Florida with medically integrated practices. So there's a lot of do's and don'ts, and I'm happy to be here with you and your audience to kind of chat about how folks can be best set up for success here.
Love it. Yeah. And, I first heard of your firm actually. I was at a FCA event and listening, and it was your partner. And she did a great job of talking about this subject matter. And then, ironically, you and I have a mutual friend, and so we had drinks and connected, and so it was kind of came full circle there. And I really knew I needed to have you on to discuss this. And one of the things I just want to mention to our audience, obviously you and I are both in Florida. We're going to try to navigate the fact that some things are state based. A lot of things are state based. Some things we'll talk about today will be federal. And then some of the state based things will apply to your state as well. You just might need to talk to your association and things of that nature, right?
Absolutely. And we'll do our best to point out what may be more state centric and what may be more, federally applicable to all folks.
Yeah, and one of the things I wanted to start out with was just the idea that I know in our state you have to be either a DC, an MD, or a DO to own a chiropractic practice, or and I think that is in a lot of states, but obviously check that. Or there is the idea of the healthcare clinic license, right? What could you bring that up a little bit and keep me up to speed on that?
Absolutely. It's a great question, Dr. Christie. And before we talk about, I guess, who can own a medically integrated chiropractic practice, take a step back and who can own a chiropractic practice, focusing on here in Florida. Oftentimes folks will come to me and it's, hey, I'd like to open up a practice, or I currently have a practice. It's me, I'm a Florida licensed DC, and I've got a New York licensed DC that I want to own or operate it with. Or I went into business with my brother-in-law. Here in the state of Florida, any
Mhm.
business that employs a chiropractic professional, pursuant to the Florida Board of Chiropractic Medicine, requires that business to be owned, as you mentioned, solely by an MD, DO, or chiropractic physician, or a conjunction of family members, immediate family members that are co-owners. We're talking, a father, a mother, or one down, a son or a daughter, or a sibling. Again, I've had situations where it's a brother-in-law and it doesn't pass muster, and they're running afoul of these healthcare clinic and board of chiropractic practic medicine license requirements, which are a felony in Florida, and it's silly, right? So one way, if you are in business with somebody who is not a Florida licensed chiropractic physician, is that healthcare clinic licensure that you mentioned, Dr.
Mhm.
Christie. Something that's not needed if you are wholly owned by a chiropractic physician and a family member or spouse. But if you have somebody that falls outside that realm, that's where that healthcare clinic license would be required. And that's even just for a chiropractic practice before we dive into an integrated one.
Okay, and so then with the integrated one, what does that look like, and how is that different mostly?
Okay, so let's talk about kind of nationwide integrated practices, and then we'll focus on Florida. So back a couple decades ago, the rule of the land nationwide was this kind of corporate practice of medicine prohibition, and essentially that regulation stood for the fact that any corporation that is looking to provide medical services has to be owned by a medical practitioner that can provide those medical services, to try to take out any undue influence of, corporation into medical care, right?
Mm.
It certainly has its foundation in that from an ethical and medical appropriateness perspective. But that law of the land, while it's still steadfast in many states, has slowly eroded over the past couple of years.
Mm.
It's still the law of the land in many states, such as California and in New York. But here in the state of Florida, there is no blanket prohibition on a layperson owning a medical practice.
Mm.
And so essentially, I myself, Michael Silverman, the non-medical professional, I can own a healthcare, a medical facility, a practice in the state of Florida, chiropractic aside. And if that practice does not submit any claims for reimbursement, I don't even need any license or regulation. I don't even need this healthcare clinic license. If it's providing chiropractic services, I mentioned, thanks to the Board of Chiropractic Medicine and the good lobbying here, protecting chiropractors, not just anybody can own that practice. You need that healthcare clinic license. But from a medical practice perspective, if it's just cash, no license needed. However, if we're going to submit any claims for reimbursement in that medical practice, Medicare, TRICARE, Champus, or even PIP for that matter, or
Mm.
commercial insurance, there are regulations that say that everybody in the state of Florida that owns that type of practice needs a healthcare clinic license unless an exception applies. And you'll see today as we talk, where there's a law, there's oftentimes, 12 exceptions to the law, and the
Yeah.
healthcare clinic license requirement is no different. And one of the exceptions that are applicable to a chiropractor looking to medically integrate, there's a statutory exception under the Florida license that says you don't need the healthcare clinic license if it's 100% owned by the chiropractic physician or an MD/DO or a
Mhm.
spouse of the chiropractic physician, and there's gonna be direct oversight by that chiropractic physician for the services that are gonna be rendered.
Mhm.
In that type of situation, a healthcare clinic license may not be required. It's a very intense, factual, specific scenario. And not having a healthcare clinic license is a third-degree felony in the state of Florida, as I mentioned. Lots of different states have the analogs for the healthcare clinic license. So you really just want to dive in. Is there an analog and is it required for me?
Perfect. Love that. Let's take a break from today's episode and announce our first sponsor. This is going to be Propel Marketing and Design. I've known Darcy Sullivan for years. We've worked hand in hand on my websites. I don't trust anybody else to do this search engine optimization. She does a great job. There's so much to it. A lot of the lingo and the words are beyond my comprehension, but it's just amazing work that she does. And if you're really going to get results with Google, you have to make sure your website is SEO optimized. And I really don't want you doing it yourself as a chiropractor. So you just have to have this type of stuff done. And if you're looking to get more organic online traffic that pulls in new patients, Propel Marketing and Design is currently offering chiropractors who listen to this podcast a free SEO website review. The free review will help you uncover methods that will improve your website and boost your search engine visibility. Head over to propelyourcompany.com/chiropractor and schedule your free SEO website review. You won't regret it. She gets great results. Your website needs this. Your search results need this. Head on over there to propelyourcompany.com/chiropractor to get your free SEO website review. So just to get that kind of squared away is that as a chiropractor, I could own 100% of a medically integrated clinic. Obviously, I couldn't render, and we'll get to that, but I couldn't render medical services outside of my scope of a chiropractor without the medical director or the like. Is that accurate?
That is absolutely correct.
Hmm.
Again, the current statute on the books in Florida,
Hmm.
and the impressions of that statute would exempt 100% chiropractic physicians
Hmm.
looking to employ somebody to render those medical
Yep.
services. With the healthcare clinic license in Florida, there's something called a certificate of exemption. If you are exempt, you can either rest on your laurels and say I'm exempt and do nothing, or you can proactively apply to the Agency for Healthcare Administration for a certificate of exemption from a healthcare clinic license. That's what I advise all of my clients because the current administration views the exception as applicable. The next one may not. But if you
Mhm.
apply for a certificate of exemption, it's $100 and you essentially say, "Hey, Dr. Christie, the owner of this practice, 100% DC owned practice, and we're going to employ an NP or a PA to render medical services, and I want your blessing." And they'll go ahead and issue that certificate of exemption. So that's certainly something to keep in mind as well.
Okay, so I in that scenario, I could employ W-2 employee, an MP or something like that. That's not a doctor. Um, if they are rendering services that are outside of my scope, do you then need the medical director on top of them? Is that correct?
That's a great question, and I want to make a distinction between the terms medical director and supervising physician because they're oftentimes commingled, but they're very distinct in the state of Florida.
Yep.
If your business is required to have a healthcare clinic license, the one that I mentioned in Florida,
Mhm.
in order to apply for that license, you need a medical director. And that medical director has to be somebody who can oversee, has the capacity to see the scope of services that are being rendered.
Mhm.
Um, in the event that we decide, hey, we're exempt from that healthcare clinic license in Florida, or you don't need it in another state, in the state of Florida, you can bring on that nurse practitioner or that physician assistant,
Mhm.
and they essentially would have a supervising physician, an MD or a DO. That's the distinction between supervising physician and medical director on the healthcare clinic license side. And that supervising physician would provide indirect supervisory services. They don't have to be on site in Florida at the practice, but they essentially have a written and established protocol that they operate under. You keep it on premises at the practice location. It says, the NP or the PA, they can provide these services, administer these treatments without consulting with that MDDO supervising physician. Otherwise, got to consult with them if these other things arise.
Awesome. And then some variations of how you could, I guess, structure that. Let's say the MD or DO, theoretically, you could, or legally, you could have them as a partner in your business, I would assume. You could have them as a W 2 employee, I guess. And then could you also do independent contractor with that MD or DO? What are some of the structural things you're seeing with that to make sure you're able to have that nurse practitioner or physician's assistant to do injections and things of that nature that are outside of the chiropractor scope?
Generally, on the supervising physician aspect of things, you'll have an independent contractor relationship
Mhm,
with that practitioner because they're not on site. They're not devoting, work on your practice on a daily type of basis. So that's generally what we'll see. Oftentimes, when you engage either as an independent contractor or employ an NP or PA, they already have a supervising physician that they're working with. So that often is a pro to look out for. So you don't have
mhm.
to try to reestablish that relationship. Maybe it doesn't cost you anything extra, as far as compensation to that supervising physician. Backpedaling just a hair
Mhm.
here on the supervising physicians in the state of Florida, a couple of years back, APRNs, advanced practice registered nurses here in Florida, have begun to enjoy autonomous practice where they do not need a relationship with a supervising physician for primary care services. So if you find an APRN that is autonomously designated, they've done that registration here in the state of Florida, and you're going to be providing primary care services, then you don't even need to worry about that supervising physician
Oh,
relationship,
that's
which is pretty good.
yeah, that's really good. Maybe there's some other states that are offering that as well. So again, if you're in a different state, which I know many of you are, look into that, and again, just glean a lot of these ideas that we're chatting about that could uh, trigger a idea or thought, and then you can check with your appropriate state laws. All right, good. That was really helpful. Let's take a short break for one of our great sponsors, TrackStat. It is a new type of software plugin for your EHR that combines patient communication, marketing, automation, and statistics with patient and employee tracking. Built by chiropractors for chiropractors, it shows your team what to focus on each day. See patient visit habits, missing information, unpaid bills, insurance collection visit average, and more. Great visibility of data so you can focus on filling your office with your best patients. When you can see what your staff and patients are doing or not doing and take action accordingly, your profits naturally grow. Take TrackStat for a test drive in your office with our free trial. Not a techie, no problem, we can help. To get started on your free trial, visit trackstat.org and watch the demo. That is trackstat.org. Now, what are some of the limitations of that medical director slash supervising physician? What are the requirements and limits you're seeing around that?
Great questions. And again, this is what we're going to want to check on a fact specific basis. Here
Yeah.
in the state of Florida, there are limitations both on the medical director side and the supervising physician side. Obviously, first and foremost, for either of them, it has to be within the scope of practice of that supervising practitioner, whether it's a specialty or otherwise that they've taken coursework on. So it needs to be within their scope of practice. Depending on the types of services that are being rendered, there can be limitations on both the number of individuals that are being supervised, the mid-level practitioners, as well as the number of clinics that are being supervised. And we have to keep in mind that um, being designated as the medical director for a healthcare clinic licensed entity, it creates obligations and liabilities upon that MD or DO statutorily. Here in the state of Florida, they need to be conducting systematic reviews of billings, for example, to ensure that the billings are not fraudulent or unlawful. There's been a lot of allegations by many commercial insurance and PIP carriers in the state of Florida, a lot of lawsuits, allegations that the medical directors are really forces because they're not conducting the reviews that would be required in order to
Mhm.
catch the fraud that these carriers
Yeah.
are alleging. And thus, they said that it was a sham healthcare clinic license relationship, and we shouldn't have paid you unless you had a healthcare clinic license, and thus we want all that money back. So we have to make sure we're not just, again, whether it's a medical director or a supervising physician, that you're not just throwing a name on a piece of paper or your wall, that they're actually doing what they need to do to both protect their licenses and to help protect your business from
Mhm.
that type of scrutiny.
Yeah, you were kind enough to send me some key information to help me prepare for this because I know it was going to be a lot of good substance to it. And one of the things you talked about was minimizing risk and having the appropriate written agreements, but also implementing an effective compliance program with this. Any additional thoughts on that? Are you seeing where you really got to make sure the compliance is squared away? You got to make sure the written agreements are there. This is not just like running a cash chiropractic practice. What are your takes on that?
Heck, even if you are running a cash chiropractic practice, I have to stress the importance of written agreements and compliance programs again, just to protect everything that you guys are working so hard, in your livelihoods and your licenses and your business endeavors. Let's talk about the importance of contracts, right? You always want to do your best to prevent he said, she said type of situation. And you want to set forth expectations, duties, responsibilities, benefits, governing law, dispute resolution. Maybe you want things to be privately hashed out in the event of a dispute through a mediator or a binding arbitration, rather going than going through the headaches and time and costs of litigation in the event of employment disputes. But something that we were chatting about recently, Doc, is
Mhm.
whether you're a standalone chiropractic practice or a medically integrated chiropractic practice, is how rampant misclassification is, just in the healthcare industry generally. And by misclassification, I mean, is somebody that comes to work for you, should they be a W-2 employee or a 1099 independent contractor? And
Mhm.
I have to let all the listeners out there know that it's not up to you and it's not up to your worker, right? As much as we may want to bring on somebody as an independent contractor, to try to not bear the costs of some of our FICA taxes and employment related taxes. If somebody is coming and working for you under your direction and your control, they're on your website, you're holding them out as a worker of your business, you're doing their scheduling. In most cases, especially if they're working 10 plus hours a week, they're likely going to be a W-2 employee and not a 1099 independent contractor. And the consequences for misclassification, you're dealing with not only the IRS for taxes that should have been withheld, Department of Labor, overtime expectations and payments, and usually everyone's happy, everything's honky dory until somebody's not happy or somebody gets terminated and said, "Hey, it's an office staff manager, and hey, I was working over 40 hours a week. I should have been paid time and a half." So you really want to do that analysis. I wish I could say there was a bright line test or rule that's, you could say, here's the criteria and yes or no. There's a lot of different criteria put out by various governing bodies. The Department of Labor, federal DOL has a test, the IRS, and essentially, you really got to match up to how much control you're exercising over this individual, whether they can do things on their own schedule,
Mhm.
use their own equipment, and then classify them accordingly. And irrespective of how they're classified, you want to make sure you match that classification with a written agreement.
Yeah, and it's such a problem, and I know you see it all the time in the chiropractic profession. I'm sure others, but even just think about it, like how you explain the DO, MD, medical director, supervising physician. Like that's a legitimate IC scenario. Like they make their own schedule. Like it's just that's exactly what it is. Whereas a lot of these chiropractors that are, um, the other thing that's funny is you can even hear it in the language. The chiropractor's like, oh yeah, I got an associate or a chiropractor that works for me. It was like and they're a 1099, like, they don't work for you. Even, like, in the way they verbalize it, but if you don't mind, I'd like to just share you had a great slide on here with some of the key things to look at for employee versus independent contractor. Can I just rattle that off real quick?
Yeah, please run through it.
Yeah, so the independent contractor is basically running their own business, paid upon completion of a project, provides own materials, tools, and equipment, works with multiple clients, temporary relationship until project completed, decides when and how they will perform the work, decides what work they will do. I mean, obviously, doesn't have to necessarily all of those, but those are like the characteristics of a independent contractor. That doesn't sound like many chiropractic associate job description. Now, an employee would be working for someone else's business, paid hourly, salary, or by piece rate, uses employees' materials, tools, and equipment, typically works for one employer, continuing relationship with the employer. Employer decides when and how the work will be performed. Employer assigns the work to be performed. I mean, it's pretty clear cut. And I know you mentioned the IRS test. This is a federal thing. This isn't a Florida thing. This is every
Correct.
state and union. And, when whether you're not medically integrated or you are going to integrate, you gotta get clear on that, and too many people are making a mistake. Like, I almost feel like I wanna make that my goal in life is to get every chiropractic practice to be doing that correctly because there's so many that aren't.
If we can share this link from the DOL on this beautiful chart that they put together, when we put out
Yep,
this recording, it'd be wonderful, very helpful again, because there's so much misinformation out there. And heck, even when I brought on an attorney, as much as I wanted to avoid paying those taxes and make him an independent contractor, I took a step back and I said, what would we be advising a client? And me and my law partner, it was
yep,
certainly obvious. So protect yourself to that end. And again, the contract accordingly that comes together is to tie everything to protect your business.
mhm,
And in different states, so your APRN that maybe comes on 1 hour a week, 2 hours a week, a couple hours a month. They may properly be classified at first as an independent contractor, but as their
right,
role evolves and their work within your organization evolves, you certainly want to make sure that you stay on top of those classification matters. And I was recently down in Miami at the National Association of Chiropractic Attorneys conference, and there were several lawyers from California that were out there, and they informed there's a regulation in California that the amount of work that they do on behalf of your practice aside, if what they're doing is an essential element of your practice, like a chiropractic, a DC associate working for a chiropractic practice, there's no wiggle room. There's no 1099.
uh,
It legally has to be a W-2. What California does often, slowly but surely makes its way across the country. So we'll
yeah,
we'll really have to keep an eye on how those regulations change. But
yeah,
certainly my mission as well as yours, Doc, to help
yeah.
people classify correctly.
It's always like if you always reference, California, Florida, Texas, New York, you start to get a kind of a swath of the whole country there just obviously because the size of the states. Let's take a short break from today's episode to tell you about the best decision I've made in my clinic in the last 10 years, and that has been adding shockwave therapy to our clinic. The outcomes have been really impressive. Certain conditions we were struggling with in the past, we're now seeing results with the shockwave therapy for that. And second of all, the ROI has been really good. When you make a big investment in something, you want to see a return, and we're seeing that return in clinical outcomes and in our investment, and that's been really nice to see. I chose Keenest Medical for 4 reasons. One is the technology is top notch. You have to have great technology. There's a lot out there that isn't quite up to snuff. The second thing is they have a really good clinical training. They have an exclusive partnership with Academy of Shockwave Excellence so that you can become clinically proficient in shockwave. You do need to get skilled at it. I think that's a big differentiator between practices that are getting great results and seeing the ROI is they have a great clinical aspect to that as well. So you want to get trained appropriately. Third is they have in-house service team for all of your technical support, which is key when you're investing in a machine like this. And then lastly, they have a very in-depth marketing and business support for you so that you can launch this into your practice effectively, that you can get that ROI on it, that you can get the clinical outcomes. And they also have really good financing options if you need that. So go to kinasmedical.com, KINAS medical.com, mention MCM podcast and receive a free shockwave in practice book with a purchase of a unit. So that's kinasmedical.com, KINAS medical.com, and mention MCM podcast. So we've been a little bit Debbie Downer here. I didn't want to be that the whole time, but that's sometimes the nature of the beast. Let's hear some positive stuff. What are some examples of multidisciplinary practices that you're working and seeing and helping out with that are thriving?
Yeah, let's turn the conversation around a little bit. We've given some of the warning signs, kind of the
Yep.
do's and don'ts. But why would somebody want to even consider,
Hmm.
medically integrating their practice? It has so many benefits for you in your practice. First and foremost, talk about oversight of your patient care, right? How many times do we hear about situations where a loved one goes to a medical practice or a hospital and there's no communication between their treating healthcare providers and there's no continuity of care? So first and foremost, it's to make the best patient outcomes for your practice. In your office, they can receive all of the care that they may need. Secondarily, but certainly not to forget, is the increase in revenues to your practice, right? Certainly if you're struggling to sell chiropractic services, your theoretical apples, you shouldn't just add on another service category and think that's going to help your business out. You should focus on selling your chiropractic services and figure out why you may have an issue there. But if you look and see that for your practice, let's say you have a personal injury intense chiropractic practice, and you know that your patients are going to get joint injections and other types of pain relieving activities from another office. Heck, it may make a whole bunch of sense to bring on an NP or a PA to provide those joint injections. Down here in South Florida, where sex sells and everything is aesthetic, there's I work with a tremendous amount of chiropractic medically integrated practices that serve as med spas, the IV nutraceuticals, the Botox, the aesthetic stuff, a lot of the cash-based services. So what may be good for your chiropractic practice may not be good
Hmm.
for your neighbor's chiropractic practice as far as the services that you're going to look to add on. But certainly it is a way to, you know, oversee all your patient care, make sure they get the best outcomes and to increase your revenue. So done the right way, if it's a good fit for you, it's certainly something to look into and make sure you do correctly. Oftentimes, chief folks come to me, I mentioned after the fact, they're in a
Yeah.
relationship with a non-licensed chiropractor or a brother-in-law. We're attorneys, not magicians. We can't undo what's been done already. We can certainly mitigate things. So the purpose of today for somebody that is looking to medically integrate is really just is a look before you leap. Be aware of some of the rules and regulations that apply, and just make sure you dot your I's and cross your T's before you jump on in.
Yeah, I love it. And there's a big contingency of our audience are what we would call sports chiropractors. And, you could do a lot of cool things if you had that integration capability, even around sports medicine. And you could, really take your practice to the next level with it. And that's an opportunity as well. There's a lot of undertaking. There's going to be associated costs, like, but you're gonna wanna do it right. You're probably gonna wanna, save a fair amount of money to be able to bring on, the proper, legal team to get it all squared away and done correctly, to have a little bit of money put away to compensate the MDDO for their work, and obviously, if you're gonna be bringing on a nurse practitioner or physician's assistant, there's gonna come with that. So you gotta prepare for it financially, legally, but even just conceptually with what your vision of your ideal practice would be, which would be cool. And so, thank you for some of those examples of multidisciplinary practices. One question I did have: let's say the chiropractor is in network with the insurances, and they do this. They bill it on. Is it they bill it under their health insurance, but under the say MD's? If it's an MD service, they bill it under the MD's MPI. Is that correct?
That's a great question. And so you would, if you are contracted with insurance providers to provide some of these medical services, you would essentially onboard and get your either MDDOs or your mid-level practitioners
Yeah.
credentialed underneath the practice through their MPI so that you can bill under your organization. But you mentioned a great point as far as insurance, no insurance, depending on the types of patients you want to service, what you want to service them with,
Yeah.
and who the payers for those services are, there's going to be less or more regulatory red tape that has to be gone
Mhm.
through.
Mhm.
Especially with cash-based services, less regulatory red tape.
Mm,
When you're billing Medicare or commercial insurances, especially as a chiropractic practice, you're going to want to really analyze your taxonomy and NPI type, whether you're organized as a straight standalone chiropractic practice or whether you are or can be modified to a multidisciplinary or medically integrated practice. Because if you are a standalone chiropractic practice and have a taxonomy as such, some of you, the commercial insurance payers may give you some pushback when you look to credential or do some of this billing. So you certainly want to do that type of analysis. Sometimes it may necessitate opening up a new a new entity or legal corporation, and slowly winding down your existing business and dumping it into the new organization and operating everything through that new organization. There's a lot, there's Stark regulations involved
yep.
and kickback regulations. So you want to make sure how you structure that is correctly. But certainly, you want to look at your organizational setup. Somebody came to me recently in Florida through a PLLC, a professional limited
Mm,
liability corporation, and a company, excuse me, and they were rendering medically integrated services. But a PLLC in Florida, a professional liability company, it has to be owned by the type of medical professional that
mhm,
can legally oversee those services, right? So we had to modify them into a regular LLC
mhm.
because otherwise it has to be owned by an MDRTO. So little things like that, again, state laws and nuances that you'll want to check with.
Love it. And I recently had Brandy Brimhall on my show. She's an insurance credentialing specialist for any state and anything, and she actually has a quite a skill set in working through some of the details of the insurances, which I'm sure is outside of your scope of dealing with some of that, right?
Oh, doc, it takes a village, as you kind of alluded to, right? You got to mentally prepare yourself. You
Yeah.
got to financially prepare yourself, and you got to, you got to engage the right legal team, the right accountants, the right credentialing folks, and the right business coaches for that matter. Because
Yep.
myself, I can give you the rules and the laws, but I'm not a clinical expert. You need some boots on the ground to help you develop those clinical policies, procedures, and oversight, so that you can really, be best set up for success there. So you're exactly right.
Love it. Well, this has been great. Question, obviously Florida, we have quite a few listeners that are from Florida. Is there any other states your firm is able to work with? Is there maybe there's particular they could even reach out if there's a contact you have? What's the scoop on that?
Sure. So, my firm, we're licensed in Florida and New York, so
Yep.
we can provide state specific advice and regulations to that end. We
Mm,
work with healthcare business owners and chiropractors, I mentioned, on a nationwide basis as it pertains to Medicare regulations,
yep.
working to enroll them in Medicare B for durable medical equipment, for example. Or we also do a lot of transactional stuff, helping chiros buy and sell their practices across the country. So we can
Awesome.
certainly help there. And as I mentioned, I'm one of the attorneys that's a member of the National Association of Chiropractic Attorneys. So if
Yeah.
it's something that my office can help out with, certainly we can help point you in the right direction. We'd be happy to do so.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I love about your firm and why I wanted you on is that there's a distinct expertise within the chiropractic profession, just not a law firm that happens to work with a handful of chiropractors. You guys have really got a great niche within our profession and understand all of the nuances of it and speak the language. So, how could they reach out to you?
You can go to my website, silvermanbain.com, Silvermanbain. You can schedule a free consultation with any of the attorneys there. Also has our contact information for our office and my email. Again, it's, I couldn't become a chiropractor myself, as I mentioned. My father
Mhm.
still practices locally and has a medically integrated practice. So, it's something that, even if it's not a client, I enjoy talking about, discussing. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and to try to, help people build
Mhm.
practices successfully. So always happy to chat about the industry to help anyone that we can.
Well, this has been great, Michael. I really appreciate your time today, and we'll have to do a part two.
Absolutely. Doc, sincerely appreciate your having me on, and I wish everybody a wonderful holiday season and a killer start to 2025. And if you're looking to medically integrate, again, today, some food for thought as far as how you can compliantly expand your business, take care of patients, and increase your revenues.
Love it. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. And if you want to make the shift from busy, broke, and broken to time-free and cash confident, or you just want to continue with the exponential growth, check us out at modernchiropracticmarketing.com. Look at the MCM Mastery tab, watch the short video on there, and check out what we are doing now for evidence-informed chiropractors. We are equal parts coaching and marketing done for you. Yes, you shoot some videos, we help you with campaign strategies and ideas and really become a thought leader in your community. You shoot those videos, you send them to us, we produce, edit, and brand them to you. Then we distribute them through all of your channels. We also take them and we turn it into one good blog per month. And every other month, we have Darcy Sullivan producing a robust blog with a topic that you pick from her database to help with your SEO. So we essentially become your content marketing agency to make sure your practice is always having ethical, elegant content marketing to help grow your practice. On the coaching side, we also help you with everything from marketing ideas to business, communications, finances, anything practice growth, and really try to help prevent you from being stuck on that island. And we hold you accountable. We have a great group of doctors that are just doing amazing things, and we look forward to help you out to take that next step in your practice. So again, check us out at modernchiropracticmarketing.com and learn more.